Greetings, and welcome to another edition of The Boogeyman. This episode I want to kind of side rail a little bit. I don't want to do necessarily superstition per se, but talk about something that I think is terribly important in critical thinking, which is the awareness of logical fallacy. Now, it sounds kind of nerdy, and many people might be thinking, well, how does that pertain to me as an individual? You come across many arguments, whether you realize you do or not, on a day-to-day basis. If you are governed by any sort of government, they are offering you arguments pro or con their specific decisions. It is important for you to be aware of when they are being dishonest intellectually, so you can actually judge their arguments for what they are. One of the most common attacks I see, especially in political videos.
But for Justin Trudeau, it's a joke. His position is described as glib, bizarre, and utterly discreditable.
She actually, here's what she actually asked.
Is that your Helen Thomas impression?
Yeah.
Is that your Helen Thomas impression?
It's like the Wicked Witch in the East.
I didn't know you did impersonations.
Here's what if I were Obama, I would have poured water on her, and she'd dissolve.
He doesn't get it.
I don't know that I can say it on television.
It's not PG.
Clueless.
Uninformed.
Uninformed. Extreme.
Ultra-conservative. Scary.
Silly.
Out of touch. Scary.
Different.
I didn't want to say what I was thinking.
Yeah, I know. Is an attack of what's called ad hominem. That is Latin for against the man, or against the person. Basically what this is an attack on a person rather than an argument. It is a way to distract away from the argument and focus on the person in a negative way to, ideally, make you be less convinced of the argument. The issue with that is, of course, a person offering an argument, that argument is valid or invalid regardless of the person who utters it. No matter how much you hate a person, if they say 2 + 2 is equal to 4, that argument is valid. Whether it comes from Hitler or whether it comes from Mother Teresa, that argument is valid. There are a couple different types of ad hominem. A really quick search on Wikipedia gives you a list of them, and I'll leave a link in the description. Wikipedia lists 5 basic types of ad hominem attacks: abusive, tu quoque, circumstantial, guilt by association, and a relatively new term, ad feminem. Now, the abusive one is probably the most common. If you've ever been on Facebook and seen a debate between two people, this commonly comes up. I also call it F that guy. Because essentially that's what the argument is. It attacks the traits of an opponent rather than their argument. That's coming from the Wikipedia entry. A prime example, if you ever see political videos, I've seen one recently against Trudeau that basically attacks him as being a privileged, spoil-rotten brat that has no true life experience. Regardless of how he grew up, his skills as a politician are not necessarily influenced directly by how he grew up. Now, of course, he may have certain biases, but that does not mean that he cannot run a country because of how he grew up. That's basically the argument you could use against anybody, especially in modern society. I'm a white male Caucasian, straight. That's a huge amount of privilege, and that obviously influences my life, but it doesn't necessarily invalidate anything I have to say. The next ad hominem attack, the tu quoque, is rather similar, but not quite the same. It's tu quoque, Latin for you also. Basically, it's saying that your opponent is doing the same thing as he's blaming you for. If somebody blames you for being biased, and then you turn around and say, well, you're biased, you come from a privileged white American society. Well, that may be, but depending on their original arguments, that may or may not be relevant to their point. For example, a father may tell his son not to start smoking as he will regret it when he is older. Here's a better example. And the son may point out that his father is or was a smoker. This does not alter the fact that his son may regret smoking when he is older. I seen recently a prime example of this, the tu quoque ad hominem attack, with a Sharon Osbourne quotation concerning abortion, and she admitted freely that she regrets having an abortion at a younger age. That may be, but she had to have had the abortion to regret it. So to say that she is also anti-abortion is not really to say that she's not pro-choice. Circumstantial. An ad hominem circumstantial points out that someone is in circumstances that they are disposed to take a particular position. Ad hominem circumstantial constitutes an attack on the bias of a source. This is fallacious because a disposition to make a certain argument does not make the argument false. Prime example, if a cigarette manufacturer comes up with a report on the health benefits of tobacco, yes, they may have a bias in this report. That does not necessarily make the study fallacious or invalid. It has to be examined on its own merits, and hopefully their data is peer-reviewed and repeatable, so it can be tested. It can be examined on its own merits. Now, we have another one that I mentioned called guilt by association. This is another common attack that you see on kind of Facebook posts and whatnot. And it's basically saying, oh, this guy's a part of this group. No, we don't listen to this group. An example would be if somebody quotes Fox News. They have an argument that's based on a quote from Fox News, and you say, well, screw Fox News, they're always wrong. Now, I'm not going to get into the pros and cons of Fox News. They obviously have their own biases and opinions. However, just merely quoting Fox News does not make a person's argument valid or invalid, except in retrospect to that quotation. For example, Bill Nye's been on Fox News, and many other very prominent, very respectable individuals next to people like Bill O'Reilly, who are not quite as respectable and very opinionated.
Here's what she actually asked.
Is that your Helen Thomas impression?
Yeah.
So to weigh the merits of that argument, you have to weigh in everyone who's been a star on Fox News, a guest star on Fox News, and you really have to address a lot, where it would be just a lot simpler just to say, okay, let's look at this argument on its own. And yes, it may have come from Fox News, but let's see if it's valid or invalid on its own merits. Again, all of these type of attacks, the defense against them is to just examine the argument on its own merits, rather than, well, Billy said that, and I don't like Billy. Well, that may be, but that doesn't attack the argument whatsoever. A new one that's even new to me is an attack called an ad feminem. Feminists will be more familiar with this than me, but basically it's a way to disregard an argument because it's coming from a woman's perspective. The term is most frequently used in a sense in feminist philosophy to note systemic tendencies to discredit opinions of women. As such, it is similar in nature and purpose to such feminist neologisms as herstory. Personally, a neologism I don't really necessarily approve of. But the idea is, if you've ever heard a woman's opinion discredited merely for her being a woman, then this is that type of attack. I once worked at an electronics store in which one of my coworkers happened to be a woman, and a woman who was very knowledgeable about the products that we sold. However, there was one instance in which a male customer consistently questioned her knowledge of the products based on her merely being a woman. And it got to the point where she had to actually come to the back room, I was on break at the time, and asked me to come out to basically repeat everything that she had already said to him, but because I was a man, he would take me seriously. And I thought it was ridiculous. I went out, sure enough. I said the exact same things she told me. She scripted and told me to say, and I said those exact things, and he approved and bought the product. I believe it was a television or sound system of some sort. I can't recall exactly. So basically it was a way to discredit her merely because she was a woman. He needed a man's perspective on this, or rather than a woman's perspective. It was really unfair to my coworker, as she was literally scripting everything I was saying to this man, but he believed me because I was a man. That's the type of fallacious thinking that really just kind of separates us, and that's kind of why I see logic and rational thinking and critical thinking as being so important. We each have different perspectives, but logic and reason allow us to bridge the gaps in between these perspectives, and really allows us to join together. We can all agree that 2 + 2 is equal to 4. That unites us. No matter what your perspective, no matter whether you come from Hispanic family, or whether you come from privileged white Republican family, whether you come from the ghettos, no matter where you come from, 2 plus 2 is always equal to 4. We can agree on that. And this universality is exactly what unites us, what allows us to be human to each other. I can say to you, maybe I don't see your perspective, but I can understand where you're coming from based on your points. And these points really get back to why this is so important to me. That everybody looks at and examines their arguments for, and the arguments coming from others, for how they are being logical or not logical. When they're being illogical, chances are they're arguing in a way that separates us from our humanity, which says, no, I'm going to attack you based on your character, I'm going to attack you based on your religious views, I'm going to attack you based on your race, whatever have you. It's an emotional, illogical attack. That is not the kind of argument that we need in today's society. We obviously have a huge disconnect where people are feeling more and more lonely, feeling more and more disconnected from their society, their government, feeling less and less like their voice is heard. This is a way for your voice to be heard. To say your argument is not actually valid. And this is why. And the this is why is important, because whenever you come to somebody and say your argument is invalid, obviously there's going to be an emotional response against that. And a way to counter that, and a way to actually be humble and humane to the people that you're saying this to, you could say, okay, well, look, let's just examine the argument for what it is, for how it stands, regardless of where it comes from, regardless of who is saying it. Let's look at the argument for what it says. And oftentimes you'll see people's perspectives shift a little bit when this happens. You know, if you give people perspectives that are not their own, but are not necessarily labeled as the other, then they can be a little bit more sympathetic to it, perhaps. This is my hope, anyways, that you use this information as a tool. I find ad hominem attacks are very, very intellectually dishonest and very rampant in today's society. If you watch any political campaign video, 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to trace a lot of its arguments into ad hominem attacks. Like I said, Trudeau's a white privileged man who doesn't know what he's doing. Harper is well, I have a lot of bad things to say about Harper, so I don't really want to go there. But suffice to say that if you're examining the merit of a political candidate, you have to look at more than just where he's coming from, who he is as a person. You have to look at what he's capable of, his arguments. Maybe you don't like his stance in certain things, but you actually like him on paper. Look at his arguments. This is much more important than finding out that he belongs to a golf club that you hate. So again, just be critical, question, and hopefully this information helps. Because I feel like a lot of people aren't actually aware of this fallacy. Even I myself might commit it from time to time. It's not something that is easily protected against unless you are aware of it. And so I'm giving a little bit of awareness to this fallacy. I'm hoping by bringing this to awareness, people are aware of it when other people use it, this ad hominem attack, but also that people are aware when they themselves use it. It's a way to actually look at the argument for the argument's sake. And really, 9 times out of 10, in debates, that's what's really necessary and really missing, is that perspective of who is valid here. Not necessarily who is more liked, not necessarily who is more popular, but who has the best arguments. And it's my hope that bringing awareness to these type of fallacies, which I will go into series with from time to time and pop in with a new different type of fallacy to look out for, that people can really increase their critical thinking skills, really be kinder to each other because of that, and really just lift each other up rather than tearing each other down based on their character, based on each other's differences. To really actually address the core arguments that we're getting to in debates and really address the issues that we're actually having rather than just point fingers at each other. So this is Boogeyman signing off. Hopefully this has educated, excited, entertained, bored. Well, maybe not so bored. I hope it didn't bore you. I really hope it didn't bore you, because I find this stuff fascinating, and I find this is the type of stuff that really needs to get into the public's parlance, for lack of a better word, common speak. I know the ad hominem attack is not something foreign to a lot of people, but I have encountered people that are obviously not aware of this fallacy, and I hope you know, I raise a little bit of awareness to this little thing I like called logic and critical thinking. I will continue to post videos, like I said, on different things that I want to address in critical thinking and logical fallacies to look out for. In order to see those, you have to stay tuned. So I recommend you subscribe, or like, or even comment on either logical fallacies that you want me to discuss, or superstitions you want me to debunk. I enjoy doing that as well, obviously, as the Boogeyman. I like looking at the places that people fear and seeing, poke, poke, there's nothing really to fear there. So anyways, the Boogeyman, signing off. Be good to each other. Question. Be critical. And most important, never fear. The Boogeyman is here. It's not a bad slogan. Signing off. Boom!
You know, they're so boring. So boring. You wanna know what? I could do a better video. You wanna know what? You wanna know what? Screw him.